Ethan Walker arrived at the county fair just after noon, guiding his old pickup truck into a dusty parking spot near the far fence. The summer sun was bright, the sky a clean blue. The warm wind carried the smell of roasted corn, saddle leather, and the sweet scent of cotton candy. Ethan had come to the fair because he had delivered a small group of cattle to the morning auction. And instead of heading straight back to his ranch, he decided to walk around for a while. It was not something he usually did, but sometimes even a quiet rancher needed a break from long days and lonely evenings. Ethan was a calm, steady man. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. His eyes were sharp from years of checking fences, watching the weather, and keeping an eye on cattle spread across open land. Because of this, people often joked that he never missed anything he aimed at. Whether it was a stray calf or a rusty nail sticking out of a barn door, Ethan never bragged about his skills. He simply lived the life he knew. As he walked through the fair, he passed children laughing on the merry-go-round. Families lined up at food stalls and ranch hands throwing rings at wooden pegs. Music drifted through the air guitars, fiddles, and someone tapping a drum. Everywhere he looked, people were smiling, bargaining, or showing off. Ethan felt like an outsider, but not in a bad way. He simply belonged to wide fields more than to crowds. He stopped near a row of small game booths. Watching a group of young men making noise near the shooting stand, they were laughing loudly and hitting each other on the shoulders, enjoying the excitement of trying to knock down bottles lined across a wooden shelf. Most of them missed more shots than they hit, and each time a shot went wide. The crowd around them laughed even harder. At the end of the booth stood a young Apache woman named Nia. She was helping run the stall with her family's permission to earn some summer money. She arranged the bottles, kept score, and handed out small prizes. She wore simple clothes and handmade beaded jewelry that reflected the sunlight softly. Her face held a quiet beauty, gentle and calm. But her eyes showed strength beneath the calm surface. When the young men noticed Ethan walking by, one of them shouted, "Hey, rancher! You look like a man who can shoot. Why don't you try?" Another added jokingly, "Yeah, hit all these bottles and you'll win yourself an Apache girl." They all laughed loudly, but the words made Nia freeze for a second. She wasn't angry. She was used to silly comments, but this one felt careless, like she was being treated as part of the game. She turned her face slightly away, pretending she didn't hear anything. Though her shoulders tightened, Ethan stopped walking. He heard the joke clearly. His jaw tightened a little, but he didn't raise his voice or show anger. Instead, he looked at Nia, not the young men. He saw how she lowered her eyes, how the moment made her uncomfortable. Ethan had been raised to respect people, and the joke felt wrong to him. Even if the men didn't mean real harm, he stepped toward the booth slowly. "I'll take the challenge," he said in a calm voice. The young men cheered and stepped aside to make room, thinking he was joining in their fun. But Ethan wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry, either, just steady and serious. Nia glanced at him, surprised that a stranger would step in. She didn't know him, but something about his calm nature made her feel a little safer. The booth operator, an older man who recognized Ethan from around town, handed him a fairground rifle. It was an old air-powered model, nothing like a real rifle. The metal was slightly scratched, the wooden handle worn from years of use, and the sights weren't perfectly aligned. Most people missed because the gun didn't shoot straight. But Ethan held it gently, testing its weight, tilting it in his hands, and checking how it balanced. His quiet inspection made people watching whisper among themselves. Nia stepped forward to reset the bottles. She worked carefully, placing each one in a straight line. When she stood back, her eyes met Ethan's for a brief moment. She didn't say anything, but he felt she was silently asking him to handle the moment with care. Ethan gave a tiny nod, not as a promise to win, but as a promise to behave with respect. The crowd around the booth grew larger. Some people recognized Ethan and nudged each other, saying he had the steadiest hands in 3 counties. Others just wanted to see if the rancher would hit the bottles or miss like everyone else. Ethan lifted the rifle, planting his feet firmly. He didn't rush. He took a slow breath, letting the noise of the crowd fade into the background. The sun warmed his hat and a soft breeze brushed his face. He focused only on the first bottle, He pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, and the first bottle flew backward off the shelf. The crowd cheered. Ethan didn't react. He shifted the rifle slightly and aimed again. His second shot sent another bottle spinning down. The young men who made the earlier joke stopped laughing and stared in disbelief. Shot after shot, Ethan kept going. His movements were smooth, steady, and controlled. He didn't rush or show off. He simply focused, breathed, and fired. Each bottle fell cleanly. Nia watched him quietly. The longer she watched, the more she realized that Ethan was not doing this to impress anyone. He was doing it to change the tone of the moment. The careless joke had made her feel small, but his actions now made her feel seen and respected. Each clean shot felt like a soft apology from the world, even though Ethan wasn't the one who had said anything wrong. Finally, only one bottle remained, a small one placed at the far end of the top shelf. It was harder to hit because the gun's aim drifted slightly at longer distances. The crowd grew quiet as Ethan lined up the shot. For a moment, he lowered the rifle and blinked. Then he lifted it again, taking a slower breath this time. He squeezed the trigger. The last bottle jumped backward and shattered on the sand. The crowd erupted with cheers, whistles, and applause. Even people from nearby booths looked over. The young men who had made the joke earlier suddenly looked embarrassed. The booth operator shook his head with a smile. Ethan gently lowered the rifle and set it back on the table. He didn't raise his hands in victory, didn't joke, and didn't act proud. He simply turned away from the booth as if he had done something ordinary. But before he could walk away, Nia stepped carefully from behind the counter. She approached him with slow steps, her voice quiet but clear when she spoke. "Thank you," she said. "Not for the shooting, for everything else." Ethan understood exactly what she meant. Without trying to comfort her too much, without making a scene, he nodded once and replied, "Nobody should be talked about like they're a prize. I just wanted to stop it." His words were simple, but the sincerity behind them touched Nia more than she expected. She gave a small, real smile, one filled with relief, gratitude, and a bit of curiosity about this quiet rancher who stepped in without asking anything in return. The fair kept buzzing around them. But for a moment the two of them stood in their own quiet corner of the world. Nia watched him walk away slowly, wondering if this small moment of respect was the beginning of something she hadn't expected to find at a noisy summer fair. When the last bottle fell and the applause faded, Ethan quietly stepped away from the booth, thinking the moment was already over. He had done what he came to do, stop the foolish joke, show respect, and walk on. But he didn't expect anyone to follow him. Nia watched him take a few steps toward the food stalls, and something inside her pushed her forward. She wasn't someone who usually approached strangers, but the way Ethan had acted, calm, respectful, and not expecting anything, made her feel she needed to speak to him again. She hurried around the counter, asked the booth operator to cover for a few minutes, and walked after the quiet rancher. Ethan heard soft footsteps behind him, turned, and found Nia standing there. She looked a little nervous, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I didn't get to thank you properly," she said. Ethan shook his head gently. "You already thanked me." "That was only for the shooting," she replied. "This is for everything else." Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. He wasn't a show-off. He wasn't used to crowds cheering his name. And he definitely wasn't used to someone looking at him like he had done something special. He shrugged slightly, his hands in his pockets. "I just didn't like the joke they made," he said. "It wasn't right." Nia nodded. "Most people hear things like that and just laugh along." Ethan looked into her eyes, not staring, just meeting them honestly. "I didn't think you deserved to be spoken about like that." The simplicity of his words made her chest tighten a little. Not in a romantic way, but in a human way, like someone had finally said what she wished people would understand. "So," she said softly, "can I walk with you for a bit?" Ethan blinked, surprised, but he gestured politely for her to join him. They walked side by side through the fair, moving past the sound of music and laughter. It was strange for Ethan. He hardly ever talked this much to someone he had just met. Nia, on the other hand, felt oddly comfortable near him. It's like she didn't have to pretend or guard her words. They passed by stalls, selling handmade crafts, woven blankets, and iron tools. Nia told him she helped her family make beadwork, bracelets, earrings, small decorations, using patterns passed down through generations. Ethan listened quietly, asking a question whenever he needed to understand better. "You make all those?" he asked as she showed him a bracelet she wore. "Yes," she replied. "My mother taught me when I was small." She said, "Each bead has meaning, and each pattern tells a story." Ethan turned the bracelet gently between his fingers, careful not to damage it. "It's beautiful," he said, and his voice was honest. Not flattery, not polite talk, but real appreciation. Her smile grew a little brighter. "Most people don't look closely enough to notice the details." "I like details," Ethan said. "They tell the truth." They kept walking. At a lemonade stand, Ethan bought 2 cups, handing one to her. She accepted it gratefully and took a small sip. "Do you always shoot that well?" she asked with a teasing smile. Ethan shook his head. "Fair rifles are tricky, but years of ranch work keep my hands steady." "Right. What kind of ranch work?" she asked. He explained mending fences, feeding cattle in storms, hauling hay, riding horses over wide-open land. As he spoke, she realized something important. Ethan's life was quiet but not empty. It was full of responsibility, patience, and small things that most people didn't value, but he did. "Isn't it lonely?" she asked gently. He shrugged. "Sometimes, but the land keeps you company if you listen." Nia took a moment to process that. Her world was different, filled with family, tradition, gatherings, and shared responsibilities. Ethan's world was wide, quiet, and steady. Yet somehow, both worlds met halfway in this simple walk, as they passed a group of musicians playing fiddles. Ethan paused beside her, noticing how her eyes lit up softly with each note. She tapped her fingers lightly against her cup in rhythm. "You like music?" Ethan asked. "It's a big part of my community," she replied. "Songs are stories too." "Do you sing?" he asked. She laughed softly. "Only when no one is listening." Ethan smiled a little. "That's usually the best kind of singing." She looked at him, then really looked at him and saw something she didn't expect. Under the quiet exterior was a man who understood more than he showed. A man who didn't talk much, but noticed everything around him. They walked further until they reached a quieter part of the fair, where small stalls sold local vegetables and handmade crafts. The noise faded, replaced by gentle chatter and the rustle of leaves overhead. Nia stopped at her family's stall. Her younger cousin was standing there, arranging the beadwork. When he saw her, he looked curious about the rancher beside her. "This is my family's booth," Nia said. "We sell crafts we make at home." Ethan admired the items closely. He took his time, treating each piece with respect. He held a beaded keychain shaped like a small feather. The colors were soft, but rich blue-white, and a touch of gold. "This one reminds me of sunrise on the range," he said, and his cousin looked impressed by the comment. "Most people just ask if they come in different colors," he said. Ethan smiled softly. "Colors mean something, don't they?" Nia nodded. She loved that someone finally understood without her having to explain everything. After buying a small beaded charm for his horse's saddle, Ethan stepped aside to let customers browse. Nia joined him. "You didn't have to buy anything," she said. "I wanted to," he replied. "Your work deserves appreciation." They stood for a while watching people admire the crafts. Nia's cousin kept glancing at Ethan, clearly curious about the quiet stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. Nia ignored her cousin's knowing grin. After a few more minutes, Nia turned to Ethan. "I'm sorry about earlier," she said quietly. "The joke. It wasn't you who made it, but I'm still sorry you had to hear it." Ethan shook his head. "It wasn't your fault, and you shouldn't have been spoken about like that." Nia looked down at her hands. "I get used to it sometimes. People don't always understand our traditions. They think everything is a joke." Ethan's voice deepened softly. "Your culture deserves respect, not jokes." There was silence for a moment, a comfortable one, not awkward. Then Nia looked up again, her eyes warm with gratitude. Would you like to walk a little more? She asked. I have some time before I return to the booth, Ethan nodded. Sure. They wandered past the livestock area where animals rested under shade. Nia watched a horse shake its mane, and Ethan explained how different horses had different personalities. She laughed as he described a stubborn mare who refused to let anyone but him ride. You talk about your animals like they're your family, she teased. They kind of are, he admitted, as the afternoon went on. They talked about small things, favorite foods, seasons they liked, stories from their childhoods. Nia spoke about gathering berries with her grandmother, learning dances from her aunts, and the pride of passing traditions forward. Ethan listened closely, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply enjoying the sound of her voice. You listen differently, she said suddenly. How? He asked, like each word matters. He looked thoughtful. If a person is talking, then it must matter to them, as she smiled, realizing she had never met someone quite like him. As the sun slowly began lowering toward the hills, Nia knew she had to return to her booth soon, but she wasn't ready for the moment to end. I'm glad you stopped today, she said softly. Not just at the booth, but here with me. Ethan felt something warm settle in his chest. I'm glad too. She hesitated, then asked, Will you be at the fair again later today? Ethan glanced at the long road leading back to his ranch, then at her hopeful eyes. He gave a small smile. I can stay a little longer. Her face brightened just enough to let him know he made the right choice in that simple exchange between a quiet rancher and a young woman who valued respect. They both felt something beginning. Not romance yet, not promises, not anything rushed. Just two strangers learning to trust, talk, and understand each other in a world full of careless noise, and neither of them expected how much this small afternoon would change the days ahead. A full week passed after the fair, but the memory of that afternoon stayed with both Ethan and Nia. For Ethan, it was rare to meet someone who listened so deeply, someone who spoke with meaning in every word, someone who made even quiet moments feel warm. For Nia, it was equally unusual to find a man who showed respect without trying to impress, someone who stood up for her without turning the moment into a performance, someone who treated her culture and her work with genuine admiration. That week, Ethan returned to his daily life at the ranch. The mornings were cool and peaceful, with golden light spreading across the fields as he stepped out to feed the horses. He talked to them in his usual quiet way, patting their necks and brushing their coats. But every now and then, he found his thoughts drifting back to the fair, especially to the moment when Nia's eyes softened with trust as she walked beside him. He didn't know what would happen next, and he didn't expect anything. But the feeling stayed with him. On the other side of town, Nia helped her family prepare for the weekend market. She spent hours working on beadwork, selecting colors carefully, threading each bead with intention. While her fingers worked, her mind kept returning to the rancher with steady hands and gentle words. She remembered how he listened, how he stood up without making a scene, and how he made her feel respected in a way that was rare. On Saturday morning, Nia woke early with a plan. She had convinced her younger brother Tavo to help her deliver some items to a few local customers. One of those customers was Ethan. He had bought a small handmade charm at the fair. She knew he appreciated craftsmanship. So she gathered a few extra items, small bead decorations, a hand-stitched cloth, and a leather bracelet with traditional patterns, and placed them carefully in a small basket. The items were gifts, though she told Tavo they were samples. By mid-morning, they reached the long dirt road leading to Ethan's ranch. The wind moved gently through the tall grass, and birds circled lazily overhead. Tavo, who was about 12, pressed his face to the truck window and said, "This place is huge." Nia smiled. Ranches usually are. When they reached the wooden gate, she hesitated. She suddenly wondered if she was being too forward, if Ethan would think she had come without reason. But then she remembered how calm and welcoming he had been, how he treated her with sincere respect. That thought gave her enough courage to step out as they walked toward the house. Ethan appeared from around the barn, leading a horse by the reins. When he saw Nia, his expression shifted from surprise to quiet happiness, subtle but real. He tied the horse to a post and walked toward them. "You drove all the way out here," he said, his voice warm. "I hope that's okay," Nia replied. "We were delivering some things, and I wanted to bring you a few items you might like." Ethan nodded kindly. "You're always welcome here." Tavo stepped forward, looking around with wide eyes. "Sir, your horses are huge." Ethan smiled lightly. "You can call me Ethan, and you can get closer if you want." Tavo looked up at Nia for permission. She nodded, and the boy hurried to the fence, where a tall brown mare stood. Ethan showed him how to hold his hand out gently so the horse could smell it first. The horse nudged Tavo's hand softly, making him laugh with excitement, while Tavo explored under Ethan's guidance. Nia stepped closer to the porch and placed the small basket on a wooden table. She waited until Ethan returned to speak to her again. "I didn't want the day at the fair to be our only meeting," she admitted. "I brought a few things. They're not for sale. They're just gifts." Ethan looked at the basket, then at her. "You didn't need to bring anything." "I know," she said softly. "But I wanted to." He picked up the leather bracelet first, running his fingers over the bead pattern. "This is beautiful," he said, his voice quiet but full of appreciation. "It's one of my favorites," she said. "The pattern is from a story my grandmother used to tell." "When something has meaning," Ethan replied, "you can feel it." Their eyes met, and a gentle silence settled between them. Neither of them looked away quickly. There was no rush, no awkwardness, just a shared understanding that something honest was growing. A moment later, they both turned when they heard Tavo's excited shout. "Nia, look. The horse likes me." Ethan chuckled and nodded toward the barn. "Would you both like a tour?" "It's not much, but I think you'll enjoy it," Nia agreed, and they walked together toward the barn. Inside, the warm smell of hay and wood filled the air. Sunlight streamed through small cracks, making long, bright lines across the ground. Ethan showed them the horses first, telling them about each one, as if introducing old friends. He spoke about a young black stallion named River who loved to run, about a gentle mare named Star who had helped him through a hard winter, and about an older horse named Dusty who had been with his family for almost 20 years. Tavo listened with excitement, but Nia watched Ethan with something deeper. She saw how his voice softened when he spoke about the animals, how he brushed River's mane with gentle hands, how he treated each one as part of his life, not tools or property. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't sudden love or dramatic emotion. It was something quieter and more important, a sense of safety, of understanding, of discovering someone who truly cared for the living world after the barn. Ethan took them along the fence line. They walked through patches of tall grass, stepping over fallen branches and stopping to admire the distant hills. The breeze carried the smell of pine trees. The sky stretched endlessly above them. "This land is peaceful," Nia said, taking in the view. Ethan nodded. "It keeps me grounded, even on hard days. Do you ever feel alone out here?" she asked gently. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it's a good kind of quiet. It gives you space to think." Nia understood that. She often found the same feeling when she walked through the woods near her home, silence that wasn't empty, but full of calm. After the walk, they returned to the porch. Ethan brought out water for all of them. Tavo sat on the steps, while Ethan and Nia sat on the porch chairs. The sunlight fell warmly across the wooden boards. Nia looked at Ethan, her voice soft. "I'm glad the fair brought us together." Ethan stared at his hands for a moment, then looked at her. "I am too." She hesitated, then said what she had been thinking for days. "People don't always see me for who I am. They see my background, my traditions, or jokes they've heard. But you saw me. You really saw me." Ethan's voice was calm, steady, and sincere. "Everyone deserves respect. And you deserve more than the way they spoke that day." Something quiet but meaningful passed between them, a soft shift, a deeper understanding. Before leaving, Nia gave him one more item, a small beaded feather on a string. "This one is special," she said. "It symbolizes protection and trust. I only make a few of them." Ethan held it gently, turning it in the sunlight. "Thank you," he said. "I'll take good care of it." As Nia and Tavo walked back to their truck, she glanced over her shoulder. Ethan stood by the porch, one hand holding the beaded feather, the other raised in a small wave. She smiled and waved back. As they drove away, Nia whispered to herself, "I don't know where this is going, but I'm glad it started." And Ethan, standing in the quiet yard, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. I hope that maybe, just maybe, a simple meeting at a noisy fair had opened the door to something real. The months after Nia's visit to Ethan's ranch passed gently, like pages of a calm story turning on their own. What started as a quiet thank you at the fair slowly grew into something steady, natural, and deeply comforting for both of them. Nia visited the ranch again the next weekend, this time bringing woven baskets and dried herbs her mother had prepared. She said it was just to share, but Ethan understood it meant more. After that, their visits became a regular part of their lives. Sometimes they met at the craft market, sometimes at the ranch, and sometimes halfway on the trail that ran along the edge of the hills. They didn't force anything, didn't rush, didn't push their story too fast. Instead, they let their moments take shape quietly. Every visit left something behind: laughter, long talks, an understanding look, a shared chore, or a silent walk where neither needed to say anything at all. Ethan learned that. Nia liked early mornings when the world was still blue. He learned she hummed softly when she worked, that she loved the smell of pine after rain, and that she always remembered the small details people usually forgot. Nia learned that Ethan was stronger than he looked, not because of his work on the ranch, but because he carried his hardships in silence and never showed bitterness. She learned that he woke before sunrise, not only for work, but because he found peace in watching the day begin. She learned he had lost his parents young, but kept their values alive in everything he did. And most importantly, she learned that he treated every person with the same honesty he had shown her the first day they met. As the county fair approached again near the end of summer, the whole town prepared with excitement. The fair only happened once a year, and it always brought people together: families, ranchers, children, travelers, and visitors from nearby towns. This time, Ethan didn't go alone. Nia asked if he would come with her and her family, and he agreed without hesitation. Though they weren't calling themselves anything yet, no titles, no labels, everyone who knew them understood that something real existed between them. On the morning of the fair, Ethan arrived at Nia's home. Her family lived in a small but warm house surrounded by tall trees. Her mother greeted him kindly. Her father nodded approvingly. Her younger brother Tavo ran toward him happily. "Ethan, did you bring your horse?" Tavo asked. Ethan laughed softly. "Not today. Horses and big fairs don't mix well." Before they left, Nia came out wearing a simple dress with beadwork around the neckline. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just liked wearing something meaningful on special days. When Ethan saw her, he froze for a second. Not because she looked different, but because her presence always had a way of settling his heartbeat. "You look nice," he said, his voice awkwardly quiet. Nia smiled, amused by his honesty. "You do too." Together, they walked with her family to the fairgrounds. The music was lively, the food stalls busy, and the games loud and cheerful. Nia's family set up their craft booth. She and Ethan arranged the beadwork carefully to catch the sunlight. People stopped often to admire the crafts. Some asked questions about the patterns. Others bought gifts. Ethan watched with quiet pride as Nia explained the meaning behind each item. Her voice was gentle but confident, and he noticed how people respected her more when she spoke with that calm strength. After helping her for a while, Ethan walked with her through the fair. They passed children running with balloons, couples sharing cotton candy, and groups of cowboys challenging each other at the ring toss. Finally, they reached the shooting booth, the same one where they had first met months earlier. Nia stopped walking. The young men who had made the careless joke last year were there again. But things were different now. They looked older, calmer, and maybe a little wiser. When they saw Nia and Ethan approaching, something like guilt flickered across their faces. One of them stepped forward. Nia, can we say something?" She waited quietly, her eyes steady but not harsh. The young man looked at the ground as he spoke. Last year, we made a stupid joke. We weren't thinking. It wasn't right. We're sorry. His friends nodded, all looking genuinely regretful. Nia didn't smile quickly or soften instantly. She let the moment settle, let the apology carry its real weight. Then she offered a small, honest nod. "Thank you," she said simply. "It means something to hear that." The young men looked relieved. One of them turned to Ethan. "And man, last year, you made us rethink a lot of things." Ethan didn't boast or smirk. He just nodded back. "We all learn with time." The booth operator, the older man who had watched the whole scene months ago, chuckled lightly. "Well, since you're here, want to try again, Ethan?" Ethan shook his head. "Not today." But Nia nudged him gently. "Come on," she whispered. "Just for fun?" He sighed, amused, and stepped forward. The crowd, noticing the familiar rancher, gathered quickly. People whispered about the story from last year. Some remembered every detail. Others wanted to see it themselves. The booth operator placed a few bottles on the shelf. Ethan picked up the same old fair rifle. It was still scratched, still slightly uneven, still stubborn. But it brought back memories of the moment that had started everything. Nia stood beside him this time, not behind the counter. When he lifted the rifle, she watched him with quiet fondness. He took a breath, aimed, and fired. The first bottle flew back. People cheered lightly. He fired again. Another bottle fell. This time, Ethan didn't shoot to prove anything. He didn't shoot to stand up for someone. He didn't shoot to silence a joke. He shot simply because Nia asked him to, not as a prize, not as a challenge, but as a memory they both shared. The last bottle fell and the crowd clapped. Some laughed, some whistled, but the energy was warm and friendly. Not mocking, when Ethan lowered the rifle, Nia stepped closer and spoke softly so only he could hear. "You didn't have to win," she said, "but I'm glad you did." Ethan looked at her, a gentle smile forming. "I'm glad too." As they walked away from the booth, Nia slipped her hand into his, not forcefully. Not dramatically, just naturally, as if it belonged there. Ethan didn't pull away. His hand closed around hers with quiet certainty. Nia's family noticed, and instead of teasing or commenting, they simply exchanged small, knowing smiles. They had seen this coming long before Ethan or Nia said anything. As the sun began to set, fairground lights flickered on, glowing softly in the warm evening air. Music filled the space, and the smell of sweet pastries drifted around them. Ethan and Nia stood near the edge of the fair, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Neither of them spoke for a long time. They didn't need to. Everything important was already clear. Finally, Ethan turned to her. "I don't know where life will take us," he said quietly, "but I'm here, and I want to be here. With you?" Nia's voice was soft and steady. "I feel the same." Their story didn't begin with romance or promises. It began with respect, a moment of defense, a truth spoken at the right time, a kindness that echoed through months. A joke from careless voices had once made Nia look down. But now, standing beside a man who honored her, she held her head high. Their lives were still simple, still steady, still grounded in everyday routine. But something had changed, something gentle, real, and lasting. And from that day forward, whenever the fair returned each year, people remembered the rancher who didn't take a challenge to win a prize. He took it to protect someone's dignity, and in doing so, he found the person who would one day become the most important part of his life.